Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Gittin, page 20, which discusses that when a person is a scribe writing a Torah, it's necessary that before they write God's name, they have to have the proper intentions to know that they're about to write God's name. Now, here we find an interesting situation. It says that imagine that the next word he's supposed to write is God's name. However, for whatever reason, instead, he's thinking that he needs to write one of Jacob's children, namely Judah. Now, in Hebrew, as it's being written, it's spelled Yehuda, Yud, Hey, Vav, Daled, Hey. Now, the 5 letters that compose this name, Yehuda, actually has in it the 4 letters of God's name, which is a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, in which we don't actually pronounce the way it's written. But nonetheless, for whatever reason, this guy made a mistake, and even though he meant to write Yehuda, he ended up missing one of the letters, which is the Daled, and it turns out that he actually wrote God's name properly. So, even though this doesn't seem like a very practical situation, but it's come to tell us the question, what do we do now? Because you could look at the Torah and say, wow, this word was written perfectly. But it all depends on the mind of the person writing it, which that on itself shows the importance of the person who is the scribe has to be a very God-fearing individual. Because it's only him and him alone that knows whether or not his intentions were to write God's name. And that could actually invalidate potentially the entire Torah, even though the word was spelled correctly. No one would ever know except for him. So in this, there's discussion what needs to be done, whether he's allowed to write over it or exactly what we're supposed to do. You can't erase God's name either. So this is a whole discussion. And it's brought down in the Talmud that maybe the only time we're exceptionally strict in this situation, that we won't even allow you to just rewrite the letters on top with the proper intention, is because of a famous expression that the Jewish people said when they crossed the sea. And those 3 words are Ze'eli vanvehu, that this is my God and I shall glorify him. Which means that maybe technically by rewriting on top of these letters technically is okay, because now it's being done properly with the right intentions, but nonetheless, it's not the most beautiful way of doing things. The Torah tells us that there are ways to get by, but that's not enough. You're supposed to do things even above and beyond the bare minimum, because that's what really shows that you have a close connection to God. If all you're trying to do is just get away with the very basics, it doesn't show that you really are longing to have a relationship with God. You're just trying to do what you're obligated to do and then basically be left alone. And this is actually certainly a message that we can incorporate in our own personal lives, because a person can say, okay, let me do the bare minimum. But when a person does just the bare minimum in a relationship, that doesn't necessarily show signs of love. The whole notion of love in Hebrew means actually to give, because a person who has a great devotion and connection to another person, they don't want to cut corners. They will do whatever they're capable of doing to be able to show that close relationship that they have. And therefore, so too when it comes to all acts of doing a mitzvah, we also want to do them in the most beautiful way, because that shows that we are not just trying to get by, but we truly want to be able to have a relationship with God.